point at the medium for $4.50. You walk up to order a coffee and point at the medium for $4.50. But right before you pay, the cashier points to the large and says it's only 50 cents more. So now the medium suddenly feels stupid. You didn't even want a large, but your brain starts doing the math. Because for just 50 cents more, the large feels way too good to pass up. And that's exactly why companies do this. You see, when there are only two options, most people compare them directly. But when they add a middle option that's priced almost the same as the biggest one, well, it makes the expensive option feel like the obvious choice. So instead of buying what you actually wanted, you spend more money, get more coffee, and walk away thinking you made the smart decision. You walk up to order. The food was running low. He couldn't afford to feed his own dog. So he walked him to a convenience store and sold him to a man for just $40. He hesitated before handing over the leash. You see, he was really broke, and he was trying to sell a movie script that he believed in, but no one wanted it. But then the script finally sold, and Rocky was going into production. So he tracked down the new owners of the dog and begged to buy him back, but they demanded thousands of dollars to return him, and the dog he'd sold for $40 became part of the film that made him famous. The food was running low. He was given a sheet with 3 words listed, and he was told to rearrange the letters to make new ones. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't. When he looked up, he realized half the class was already done. And since he still couldn't solve the words, he felt stupid and embarrassed. But his side of the class actually got 2 words that were impossible to solve, while the other side of the class got 2 easy words, which is why they were able to finish. But the third word was Cinerama, which everyone in the class had. The kids with the easy words felt confident, so they quickly rearranged it to American. But the kids with the impossible words already believed they. If you toss a baseball up in a car, he was given a sheet. He felt stupid and embarrassed. But his side of the class actually got 2 words that were impossible to solve, while the other side of the class got 2 easy words, which is why they were able to finish. But the third word was Cinerama, which everyone in the class had. The kids with the easy words felt confident, so they quickly rearranged it to American. But the kids with the impossible words already believed they would fail, which ended up meaning they did. He was given a sheet with 3 words listed, and he was told to rearrange the letter. If you toss a baseball up in a car going 100 miles an hour, why doesn't it fly back into your chest at 100 miles an hour? And if you activate a drone inside the car, it appears stationary to you, but is it actually moving 100 miles an hour? And if so, why doesn't it need to thrust forward with its propellers? Well, it's because the ball, the drone, and even the air inside are already moving with the car. So when it goes up, it keeps that motion with no headwind to push it back. This also means if you removed the windshield, well, it would be a whole different story. If you toss a baseball up, he took a bite of a boneless wing, and something felt wrong in his throat. For 3 days after, he had a fever and couldn't keep food down. Later, doctors found a thin chicken bone stuck inside. So he sued the restaurant. He argued that the menu said boneless, so there shouldn't have been any bones. But the court said boneless wings was a style of food, not a promise that every bone had been removed. And because bones are naturally part of chicken, the restaurant wasn't responsible, meaning, according to the court, even boneless wings can still have bones. He took a bite. As you run into the course, you have to try to dodge the dangling wires all around you. But each wire is live with electricity. So if you brush against just one, you can get zapped with around 10,000 volts. And the farther you go, the more mud covers your body. That makes it even easier for electricity to travel through you. So if you slip and fall, you might hit one wire, then another, and another, getting shocked again and again until you finally crawl your way out. As you run into the court, he raced to be the first man over the wall, but as soon as he reached the top, he was shot and killed by an arrow. And the next man did the same, but he was thrown to the ground below. This happened over and over again, until one man finally survived and made it inside the enemy walls, which disappointed the rest of the soldiers. You see, the first one over the wall would receive a crown, which acted like a medal of honor. This gave him fame and fortune, letting him climb the ranks into greater political power, which is why so many soldiers were willing to risk their lives for it. When you put them on, tiny microphones inside pick up the noise around you, and they read the highs and lows of the sound wave. It uses it to create a wave that's practically the opposite. And when this is played through the headphones, the two sound waves cancel each other out, which cuts out a lot of the outside noise. But if your mom suddenly screams at you, the headphones have to hear the sound, read the wave, and make the opposite one. So if the noise changes too fast, by the time they react, it's already too late. When you put them on, he punched the doll and started yelling at it, while a preschooler watched him. Later on, she was given a doll, while scientists observed her every movement. But even though nobody told her what to do with it, she started acting aggressively and even made up new ways to hurt the doll. You see, kids learn by copying the people around them. So if they're watching something violent, they might imitate what they see, which could make them start acting aggressive. He punched the doll. If you were accidentally swallowed, grab onto the back of the tongue and kick around to trigger a gag reflex. This should get you coughed out. But if you miss your chance, spread your arms and legs wide in the throat, bracing yourself against the walls to stop from sliding down. This would hold you in place for a while until the person swallows food, which would push you straight into the stomach. Now you could climb a chunk of food floating in the acid, but at this point, you're just waiting for the inevitable. If you were accidentally swallowed, her arm slipped into the gap between it and the wall, wedged in so tight she couldn't pull it back. And as the door kept trying to open, it dragged her deeper in. They grabbed the door and tried pulling it back to free her arm, but nothing worked. Even when they greased her arm with hand sanitizer, she didn't budge. And for 3 long minutes, they kept pulling, until they rubbed lotion around her arm. Then she pulled as hard as she could, and it finally popped free. Her arm slipped into the... If you stacked up Legos a mile into the sky, somehow the bottom Lego brick still won't crush. But if you try the same thing with concrete, it contains tiny cracks and weak spots, meaning the bottom blocks would eventually crack after about 2,000 feet. But Legos are made from tough plastic, and their interlocking shape keeps the pressure centered. So when the stack is perfectly lined up, the force travels straight down, which means, in theory, one Lego brick could support a tower 4 times taller than the Burj Khalifa. If you stacked up... When the hurricane hit their orphanage, they had no money to fix it. More than 40 kids were about to lose their home, but their town was hosting a fishing tournament, offering a huge cash prize to any team that caught a blue marlin. Now, none of the boys had ever fished before, and their guardian had no experience with this type of fish, but they signed up anyway. Then, right before the tournament, the man crashed his car, nearly forcing them to drop out. But he managed to make it onto the boat, and soon they had a bite. For almost 45 minutes of struggling, they dragged a giant blue marlin onto the boat. It was the biggest catch of the day, and the orphans won more than $250,000, enough to save their home. When the hurricane hit, The hawk sees a mouse and swoops down with its claws open, but when its feet The hawk sees a mouse and swoops down with its claws open, but when its feet hit the cage, they slip into tiny loops of fishing line. Then, as the hawk tries to fly away, the loops tighten around its feet. Because the cage is pinned down by a heavy weight, the hawk can't lift it off the ground, so it stays trapped on top of the cage until a trained handler carefully loosens the loops, checks the bird for injuries, fits it with a tag, and lets it go. The hawk sees a mouse. The customer suddenly attacked her, and the shock left her unable to speak. Since the injury happened on the job, she said she could never work again. So her workplace's insurance company paid her every month for 16 years. But there was a problem. During that time, she saw other doctors, and none of them recorded that she was unable to speak. The insurance company got suspicious and hired a detective to watch her. He saw her chatting outside a school and making phone calls. Then he walked up to her with a hidden camera and asked for directions, and she answered him out loud. A court ruled that her muteness was no longer real and her payments were cut off. The customer suddenly attacked her, and the shock left her unable to speak. Since the injury happened on the job, she said she could never work again. So her workplace's insurance company, if your family had you cremated, as the intense heat filled the chamber, it would dry out your muscles and reshape the proteins inside. This would shrink your muscles down, forcing your arms and legs to bend, while your fists clenched in front of your chest. And you would eventually end up in a boxing pose, making it look like your body was still moving before it finally burned away. If your family had you, the prisoners have been sitting in front of a blank wall their entire lives. They don't turn around. They just stare at the blank wall. Now, place a fire behind them. Then build a walkway between the fire and the prisoners, and raise a short wall. Now, move objects across the walkway. The fire will cast their shadows onto the wall. But because the prisoners have never seen anything else, they believe the shadows are real. They name the shapes and base their reality from them. But what if one prisoner were freed and finally turned around? He would see the objects being moved and the fire casting the shadows. He would slowly understand the shadows weren't reality. But if you return him to the others and he tries to explain it to them, they'll think he's crazy and keep looking at the wall because the shadows are the only reality they've ever known. Prisoner, he looked up and saw a plane drop something from the sky, a small object falling straight toward the city. Then, a blinding flash. The explosion ripped through everything around him. Buildings collapsed. Fires spread instantly. He was thrown to the ground. Burns covered his arms and face, and his hearing was permanently damaged. He spent the night in a shelter, and then made his way back home to a different city. A few days later, he went into work, still bandaged, and started telling his boss what he had seen. Then, a plane flew overhead. Another object fell. Another flash. Another explosion. His bandages were blown off. He was exposed all over again, but somehow lived to tell the story. He looked up and saw a plane. If you put on a backpack with nothing inside, your shoulders will still tense, your back will brace, and your muscles will get ready to lift. But then, there's nothing inside, so your body is ready for a load that never shows up, which can make the empty backpack feel lighter than not wearing it. You see, when you expect something to be hard, you should prepare for it. And if it turns out to be easier than expected, well, you don't just feel relieved, you feel stronger. If you put on a backpack, if we turn the entire ocean into jello, what would happen if an asteroid hit it? Well, a normal ocean could produce a deadly tsunami, but since jello is mostly water, the energy would tear through it, breaking it up into chunky waves. These waves would pile onto the coast, covering streets and buildings. You see, the real danger isn't the impact, it's getting caught in it. Because once you're trapped, you would just slowly suffocate inside the jello. If we turn the